Well, hello there, and welcome to day 30 of A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. And I am doing my second newly released Netflix original in a row by watching The Dig. My relationship with archaeology is quite interesting. I was a child of the 90s, so therefore, of course, I was a child of Jurassic Park, as every good 90s child should be. And weirdly, I fell in love with the scene of Ian Grant brushing the dinosaur bones at the very beginning. Alan Grant, not Ian Grant. Yes, Alan Grant brushing the dinosaur bones. And for a long time, as a kid, I would say that I wanted to be an archaeologist. Life didn't go that way. But then another decade later, when at university, doing my undergrad, I found myself spending a lot of time drinking with archaeologists. To the point where I probably would see them on a week-to-week basis, and even got to go on dig sites and stuff around the South Wales area. And so I've had, a continuing relationship with archaeology in spite, whether I wanted to or not. The Dig is an interesting film to me personally, and I'm going to switch hats for a second, because Sutton Hoo weirdly came up in other work that I was doing. We're currently producing The Serpent's Sword, which is the adaptation of Matthew Harvey's series of novels, The Benicia Chronicles. And as part of the proof of concept footage we were filming, we worked with a man named Matt Bunker, who I understand was involved currently with Sutton Hoo, and works at Oxford University. And so Sutton Hoo was something that we talked, especially with Serpent's Sword, and the importance of historical accuracy. Sutton Hoo was mentioned a lot, because it is set during the time period, roughly, of the book series. And so when this film was announced, and I was sort of made aware of it through reverberations well before I traditionally would do. And so it was a lot of build-up getting to watch this film. Whereas, this I have at least some personal connection to it, which is a bit strange, even though, of course, this is about the discovery of the Sutton Hoo burial site, which was in 1939. So, to give you a premise, it follows Edith Pretty, who is a landowner, a widow and landowner, with her young son, played by Edith being played by Carey Mulligan, not the young son, who has found an or dug up an archaeological relevant site with the help of a local experienced amateur, you might say, called Basil Brown, played by Ray Fiennes. And of course, as they unearth more and more of this discovery, it grows from a small archaeological find to something that is very significant, and of course draws the attention of people from the British Museum, and of course has national significance in terms of archaeological history and sort of the importance of Anglo-Saxon history. Now, this is definitely under that category of film it's based on a true story, based on real people. But I draw it closer to films that probably are more contemporaneous to when the films were made about these subjects, such as Calendar Girls, Fisherman's Friend, The Military Wives, where it's telling the story of people in Britain, little pockets of British culture, and things that we might not necessarily be aware of, but they're kind of important when you think of Britain and what gives us an identity as a nation. And this definitely is under that category. It's based around real people, a real event, and has significant relevance to British history and British culture, going back and forwards. The problem, of course, with those sorts of narratives is it's a fine line to walk between wanting to tell a important part of British history and culture whilst also still making this a drama. This does seem to walk that line well, insofar as the points of conflict are partially around Carey Mulligan's character, who has quite early on seems to have a declining health due to her heart, and is very aware of the fact that she likely doesn't have long left. As I said, she's a widow who also looked after an ailing father as part of her backstory, and so her relationship with the Sutton Hoo horde is very personal to her, insofar as she seems to have a relationship with death and with what happens to a body and what happens to people's things and what it means to someone, the importance of a burial site as sacrosanct. And then for Basil Brown, it's very much about making his mark, being respected. It's only recently, in real world terms, that he's even been acknowledged for the Sutton Hoo unearthing, in spite of his major importance to it. But he just wants to feel, as a character, like he has done something and contributed to something important, and so there's a conflict there. And there are issues like the fact that when the British archaeologists from the British Museum do come, they are somewhat bristling against our leads, and if I did have one major bugbear, although I have a few other things, it's the fact that it portrays professional archaeology as pompous and arrogant, and there is something to be said about, maybe if professional historians were to come to a archaeology site that was discovered by people who were not from an organisation, they may, of course, slightly try to step over those people. But, as I said, I have been friends with many an archaeologist and worked alongside historians and archaeologists. And the depiction of these people as arrogant and the people who are not the professionals as, the disrespected does feel a little tilting it towards the fact that there are certain procedures that are required for archaeology and certain respects that are that exist, and so therefore I'm not so keen on that. It's okay as a conflict, however it then does portray the individuals as arrogant, sexist, and just rude in a way that I think slightly veers more into sort of melodramatic. So the conflicts are there, and I think they stand on their own, and actually I got very invested in the characters that I didn't think I would, because sometimes I find these sorts of dramas a little dry a little slow. And again, I worry sometimes that when you watch a film like this, because they're trying so hard to, of course, respect the people who were real world people, that they treat them with delicate gloves. But actually, I was invested in Ray Fiennes' character, and I was invested in Carey Mulligan's character, and some of the people around them. The problem lies in, of course, when they decide to possibly lean into the dramatic side of it. The thing that I really enjoyed for the first act of the film was the fact that it almost felt practically documentary in the documentary style. In terms of the conversations between characters, almost felt like they were filmed on handheld. There was a bit of when you're following Ray Fiennes as he's walking along, you practically feel like a character who's watching them, like you almost like a time team kind of filming. But when it gets when it gets to the more fictionalized drama, or the dramas that have storylines that have been enhanced, primarily focusing around a married couple, both of whom have feelings towards other people, it gets a little melodramatic and stands out compared to the very realistic style that was going before it. So that's really where I think it doesn't work for me. Plus, because it's already a 1 hour and 50-minute film, if you cut some of the storylines like that, or certain tensions like that, I genuinely think it would have been a tighter film for it. Other than that, I genuinely do think it's a pretty good film. The only other thing that I think slightly put my back up, and I know put my fiancée Helen's back up a bit, is the fact that so again, this ties back to the historical person, which is that Edith Pretty was actually 56 during the time of this discovery, whereas Carey Mulligan it seems like the character could only be in her late 30s, early 40s. Early 40s early to mid 40s at most. And that's a real problem. I didn't mention this back in the Mank review, but they did something probably, equally as bad, which was to do with Amanda Seyfried's character and another character who, again, who are older women who are being played by much younger women. And, of course, some of our crown jewel actors are, someone like Carey Mulligan, who is a very good actress, deserves to play a really rich role like this. However, the fact that we're dismissing older women or de-aging older women, it's not acceptable at this point. There are some, older actresses and characters who deserve acknowledgement and the chance to be performed, and it might not be Hollywood sexy, but it's not acceptable to dismiss them. Other than, a few bristling points, but other than that, I genuinely thought The Dig was really good. And as I say, it's, archaeology is something that seems to I come across a fair amount, and I do think it's representation of archaeology is really good in a way that I don't know if it will do for archaeology what the Queen's Gambit did for chess, but it would be nice if it kind of drew people into taking an interest sort of more broadly. But yeah, again, 2 pretty good films in a row. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care.